Hi, welcome to Paintwell. This is Astrid. Alex is here too.
Hi.
And we're gonna do something a little different today.
Yeah, so we had this idea. We wanted to show how two different painters can take the same exact subject and produce something completely different. We wanted to emphasize individual styles. So we thought, how do we do that? We decided to make one setup and we'd both paint it separately, not trying to emphasize difference, but trying to just paint as we would want to paint. And in that way, show the differences between two painter styles. And you can see here the effort we go to set up an image, how much time it takes just to set something up.
So yeah, 2 sets of eyes, 2 sets of hands. This is gonna show the difference that 2 different people can make looking at the exact same thing and painting the exact same thing. So the other thing that we did that was a little special about this was we painted each of our paintings separately. Neither of us was in the room while the other one was painting. We edited them separately, and we haven't seen each other's paintings. So we're seeing them for the first time as we're recording this. So let's see what happens.
So aside from working together on setting it up and deciding on the composition, we did not confer on what we were going to do. We chose the same size piece of paper so that, you know, it'd be a one-to-one relationship so that we'd actually both be painting the same painting, but we didn't confer on brushes or palette or technique. My palette was this. I had titanium white, cad red deep, which I didn't even use, cadmium yellow light, burnt sienna, burnt umber, which again I didn't even use, and ultramarine blue. Oh, and cobalt blue. Cobalt blue was really essential. I really loved it.
Okay, and I had titanium white, ivory black, alizarin crimson, naphthol red, which is a substitute for cadmium red medium. I had Hansa yellow, which is a substitute for cadmium yellow. I had cobalt blue, and I had Prussian blue.
Prussian.
Yeah. Alex hates Prussian blue, but I really felt like I needed that greenish blue to capture the range of blues that I was seeing, so.
Yeah, I hate Prussian blue because it's an awful color.
Shut up. It's fine. Just don't know how to use it.
It's horrible to use. That's why I don't know how to use it. I used it and said, this sucks, and put it away.
Don't listen to Alex.
No, you shouldn't listen to me. You should try it and decide for yourself. You have, for example, 2 different points of view here. One person likes it and one person knows that it's terrible.
Don't listen to Alex.
Yeah, so we haven't seen the other person's painting until right now. You can see already that I chose to work on a toned background. I used a neutral gray. The neutral gray you painted.
Yeah, and I might have chosen to work on a toned surface if we had had any sitting around, but we didn't. Or at least I didn't know where they were, so I just toned mine.
I decided to grab one of the toned papers because I've been working on these value studies for our Patreon and I got tired of working on white. So I just wanted something different. Oh, we should mention, I am on the right and Astrid is on the left. You're working into wet and I'm starting with a dry surface.
Here you see Alex caring a lot about the drawing. I was still kind of in the mode of doing the Impressionist influence painting that I did a couple weeks ago and not being super invested in drawing accuracy because I knew it was gonna change when I started painting it. I did try to get the shape of the apple right, but I was not worrying about it as much as I think Alex was.
Yeah, I took care to do it now because I didn't want to worry about it later. I encourage especially new painters, to not draw with a pencil, but to use a paintbrush like Astrid is. But I wanted something more exact. I didn't have any plan going into this, and when I don't have a plan, I tend to default to my instincts, and my instinct is precision. I love pencil, and so I grabbed a pencil because it's just my default mode.
Now you'll see me have the problem with this drawing with paint is I'm painting on a piece of gessoed paper, and the gessoed paper is much more absorbent than, say, like a canvas would be, or definitely much more absorbent than a panel would be. So there's gonna be points when I start to try and make changes to this drawing or kind of lighten up those black lines a little bit, and it doesn't go so well.
What I'm doing now is an underpainting using burnt sienna. Using an underpainting is my default mode, so that's what I did. But again, I had no plan, so I just went with it.
Yeah, I had no plan either, except to finish the painting in about the same amount of time as Alex's painting took.
I painted first, and so one piece of information we shared with each other, or I shared with Astrid, was how long I took, which is about an hour and a half.
There you see something interesting that happened. The terpenoid that was in the paint that I was painting the lines with kind of worked into the layer of really thin paint that was on the surface already. So we got kind of these ghost lines. And this is gonna develop into probably the ugliest drawing I have ever done in my life. But you can't see it under the painting in the end. So I guess it's okay.
The reason I recommend, particularly the painters starting out, to use a brush rather than a pencil is that using a brush to draw helps you to develop a painterly mark, which is something that I really appreciate and I encourage in students. So Astrid is using the painterly marks, and so if you're new to painting, I recommend using Astrid's technique. These paintings are not supposed to be emblematic of technique. They're not really teaching. They're just kind of showing that, again, what we're trying to illustrate is the difference between two painters. And already you can see how different they are. I had no plan, you had no plan, right?
Right.
Yeah. Though it's interesting, again, that we ended up with the same value ground. So I think that shows, I was a little afraid going into this that it would be too similar, that we'd end up with a painting that was too similar.
Oh, yeah, it does not look like it's gonna turn out that way. Again, I still have not seen Alex's finished painting, so we're watching it develop right now.
You can see the drawings are very similar though, even though I used the more precise pencil and she used the more painterly brush. The drawings, if you overlap them, they're very, very similar.
Here, I was annoyed with those inky black, super thick lines that had developed as I was refining, and I'm trying to kind of lighten them up, but on this absorbent paper, the paint doesn't quite move and the turpenoid doesn't quite make the paint move the way it would on a canvas, so it wasn't doing quite what I wanted it to do, and so again, this is an incredibly ugly drawing.
So I chose burnt sienna because I thought it was a good complement to the green apple, and I wanted to emphasize the complements in the shadow and even the light mass. I ended up using it in the light mass. So that's why I used the burnt sienna. It was a nice complementary color to the green of the apple. You mentioned how you didn't like how absorbent the paper was, and I actually really did like it, because when I started this apple, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I just instinctively started making an underpainting. And as it developed, I decided I wanted that transparency that comes when you have an underpainting. I wanted to emphasize that transparency, but painting alla prima, painting it all at once, it's very hard to get that transparency without mixing the color. At this point, I had decided that was going to be my goal, to try and achieve transparency like a layered multi-session painting, but with a single session.
I didn't actually mind the absorbency of the paper once I started painting. Once I started getting thicker paint on there, it was just when I was drawing with the paint that it wasn't quite behaving the way I wanted it to. And what I'm doing now is I'm establishing 3 values. I've got kind of a middle value over the whole surface already. I'm putting in the darks, and then I'm gonna try to wipe the lights out. There's really only one area of light. I'm gonna try to wipe it out. It's not quite gonna work again because of the absorbency of the paper. So here we go.
Yours looks like a terrific charcoal drawing. I really like
Really?
right now, if you stopped right now, it'd be this great expressionistic charcoal drawing.
Okay.
So while Astrid's wiping out, I am still filling in my underpainting, and all this little texture I'm doing in the background will be completely gone. It's a complete waste of time. If I were doing a multi-day painting, this texture would be great. I'd be able to put some transparency down in the background and it'd be this nice little texture playing underneath it. But as it is, it's just a complete waste of time. We made a compositional no-no.
Oh?
Yeah, we made a compositional, if I were teaching a student, if a student brought this to me and showed me this painting, I would immediately say, avoid this, avoid doing what we did. I wonder if you notice it. I guess you haven't yet, but I noticed it when I was editing. And, well, I'll see if you notice it now that I've brought your attention to it.
Bet I won't.
But I realized and I'll talk about this later, I realized as I was going along, I was having trouble with a certain section of the painting, and when I got into the editor, I realized why I was having that trouble.
I want to point out something that I'm doing that you can't see on the video. I'm not painting the background with straight ivory black. It's ivory black, Prussian blue, alizarin crimson, and I think I might have thrown some of my cobalt blue in there too. Basically, I took all of the dark colors on my palette and I didn't mix them all together in terms of mixing them with a palette knife until they were one color. I just put them all on my brush. So what's going on, if you could see it in real life, you would probably see slight variations in the black in different parts of this background, but on the screen you can't.
My background black was ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. I had originally intended to use ultramarine blue and burnt umber, but with the sienna underpainting, I just went with sienna. And you can see I'm doing the same thing with the black as I did with the burnt sienna, this kind of cross-hatching mark. And it ended up looking like burning embers, like it reminded me like the Balrog from Lord of the Rings. It was like this glowing red underneath the black, and it was all wrong from the painting, and I ended up getting rid of most of it.
Something that's happening in Alex's painting, which we will definitely talk about more later, is glare on his brush strokes. That affected our work a lot, and so we'll get into that some more.
Yeah, glare and painting and recording video. Oh, it's just a horrible combination. And yeah, here I wipe it down to knock down that glare.
My strokes so far have all been pretty much horizontal in a general way, so it's not a problem on my painting at the moment, but it will be later.
So now, okay, so now we can actually see the comparison of our chosen blues. All right, so I laid down a blue and then decided against it. I thought it was too dark. You stuck with that dark blue, which I think is closer in value to what was actually there. And I went with a much brighter blue. So yours, I think, is more accurate, and I just decided to throw caution. Well, I made a decision to change it. And as a painter, I encourage you painters to make decisions to change your painting. And I don't know, I just put down that first blue, didn't like it, and decided to go with a lighter version. So yours is more, I would guess, it's hard to say now, but your value is likely more accurate.
Yeah, I swear it was not as radically dark in the actual room. Now that I've started to move my brush in different directions, now you can see I'm getting the glare too.
Yeah.
And we are wrestling with solutions to that, and right now we don't have one.
Yeah, it's an internal problem because we have to pump a lot of light onto the painting in order for it to show up well on camera. But the more light you have, the more glare you have. So it's just an internal problem. You can see actually that on the left and right hand edges of my painting, the paper is curling a little bit, so it's going to pick up the glare more than anything else, and that's just, I couldn't fix that. It's just the paper just curled a bit. I'm painting on what I found to be a really lovely surface of Reeves BFK, which is a which is a very nice drawing paper. And I had bought it just really excited to draw on it. And at the same time, I bought watercolor paper to paint on. And Astrid wanted to just some paper for paintings, and I said, well, it's in the bag there, not realizing that she would grab the loose paper that was in the bag, and she grabbed the Reeves BFK.
And I ripped it into pieces, and I painted over it with acrylic gesso.
Yeah, ruining my expensive, lovely...
Yeah, it cost like $20 a sheet, didn't it?
16 or 17.
Yeah.
So it's a lovely, lovely paper. And it's made from cotton. It's not wood pulp, it's from cotton. Yeah, so, but it ended up being a lovely surface to paint on.
Oh, so it's okay.
I guess. I don't know if I'd spend the money on it to paint on again, but
Yeah.
since we have it.
Glare. What's happening now is, if we hadn't had to deal with that glare, I probably could have made this painting, I probably could have finished it to a level I was satisfied with in 20 minutes, maybe a half hour. But whenever I would make a stroke that curved a little bit vertically, we get the glare, and so I would have to knock down the glare, or I'd have to somehow blend it out horizontally. And when you're painting a curved surface like an apple, that really inhibits you when you've got to make all your strokes horizontal. It's not a big problem on that flat surface or the background, doesn't matter, but when you can't make your strokes go different directions, it's rough.
Yeah. I will run into this problem. I already ran into it with the background, but I will run into the glare problem, particularly on the apple when I'm trying to paint a curve and I can only paint it with horizontal strokes because of the glare. It's really irritating. Here's something else I can see a difference happening. With my cast shadow and your cast shadow, you went with, again, what you observed and allowed your shadow to blend into the background, which I think is a cool effect, very Caravaggio. I decided to do something a little different, and the value is very similar to the background, but I pumped up the chroma, so chromatically it's a very bright color, and I will continue to bump up the chroma at the end of the painting.
I really like when edges get lost. I like when the dark side of an object blends into whatever the dark background is behind it. I think that is cool. And I'm really into Caravaggio. I was not attempting to do anything in a Caravaggio style for this painting, but that is an effect that I'm really into.
Did you bother to paint the folds in the cloth?
Nope.
No, me either. I kind of regretted it after the fact, because mine, because I used a brighter value, it's just this big bright blue field, and I think it might end up being a little flat. You can see the glowing embers of my background, and I think it's distracting from the rest of the image.
I don't know. I can't judge that till it's done. I don't know. The one thing I knew I wanted to do when I went into this painting was work with thick paint, work with wet in wet, thick, chunky paint, just because I like it. And an apple or an orange or something that's a simple shape is a very nice place to experiment with thick paint.
Now you can see in my shadow now I bumped up the chroma, so I added some cobalt blue to the ultramarine.
Oh, wow, yeah.
But I tried to keep the value the same, which gave me an idea. I was thinking we should try painting a single value image.
Huh.
So just all the form and everything would be described simply in changes in chroma.
Huh. Sounds like a Matisse kind of deal.
And now we're both laying down the green, and you can see our color matching is very similar.
Yeah,
It's
surprisingly
almost
enough.
identical. So again, here, you can see a difference in styles. Again, I had no plan going into this, and my default mode of painting is thin, is very thin. Astrid was going for thick brushy marks. I made thick brushy marks in the background and the cloth, but for the actual apple, I started to lay down paint and then took it all off and just essentially just scrubbed it into the paper. And what I got was a combination of the burnt sienna underpainting with the green I had made. Originally, our colors looked the same. I think we both matched our color to the apple pretty well, but then I allowed it to blend into the burnt sienna and mine became warmer. And my paint application is very, very thin. There are an infinite number of ways to apply paint, and I think I did them all in this painting. The other thing, and what happened as I started going along, I didn't like how the paint was laying down on the apple, so I took it all off. And when I did that, I got this idea to invert the traditional order of thick to thin. Generally, foreground objects and subjects and lighter objects are thicker paint because you needed to have thicker paint in order to paint lighter things. The lead whites tended to just be thicker, and the dark colors tended to allow you to be thinner. You ended up having light objects be thick paint and dark objects be thin paint, and I inverted that. So my subject is the thinnest application of paint on the painting, and then the foreground and background are actually much thicker in their application.
Main difference I see right now in our color matching is I have put a lot of blue into the dark side of my apple because that was what I was seeing. I was seeing a lot of the blue of the cloth reflecting up into the dark side of the apple. And I think Alex is taking a different approach to it.
Yeah, again, that idea of allowing the underpainting, such as it was, allowing the underpainting to still be visible in this alla prima painting, it ends up being warmer just naturally because I'm doing that. It's interesting that, well, for a second there, the left-hand side of the cloth, both yours and mine, even though we approached it differently and used a different value, were almost the same. But I think it was the way the light was catching on your brush strokes. I took about half an hour longer than Astrid to paint this painting, and part of that is because I was using a very different technique. And you can see right now I'm trying to fight the glare by painting a curve with horizontal brush strokes. What I did is, once we both separately strung out all the footage, I then dropped both pieces of footage into a separate sequence and then compressed the time in mine so that they were about equal. So my hour and a half is going to take the same amount of time as Astrid's hour as far as it's presented here, even though mine is sped up.
I did something in here just now. I had decided that my colors were a bit boring. They were a bit too unambiguously cool and a bit too sort of stained glass-like, I think. I wanted to have a little bit of dullness in amongst the very high chroma colors that I had on that apple. So I mixed some duller greens, I mixed some red into my greens and brought in some duller greens into my apple there. And then you'll see me bring back some more chromatic greens. So it was sort of a push and pull. I find olive painting to be kind of a push and pull. You push it a little bit darker and then you pull it back a little lighter, or you push this chunk of paint a little bit to the left and then you push it back a little to the right. That's what painting is like for me.
No, I mean, it is. It's a series of relationships. It's a play of relationships, one to the next, color and value and mark and drawing.
The key is when there's a balance to stop. And that's the hard part, because sometimes you keep on pushing and then, oh no, you push too far and now you can't get it back.
Knowing when to stop is one of the major aspects of learning to paint. Now that all of the major shapes are in, the painting slows down because now we're focusing on detail, we're refining. The major shapes are the easy part and they go fast, but this is where the painting is made in this next, well, the next 20 minutes. Okay, see what I'm doing there? I'm scratching off that bit of paint. That's the part of the painting I was fighting with the whole time. And you can see where it is in the composition, right?
Oh, it's in the middle.
Yeah.
Oh.
So what we did was we created a giant X right in the middle of the painting. We just made a composition that drew the eye directly to the middle of the painting. And subconsciously I noticed this because that kept popping forward, that little triangle of blue, but I didn't really see it until I got it in the edit. And it's like, oh, look, we made a giant X. And if a student brought that to me, I'd say, wow, this looks like a pretty nice painting, but beware that you designed a composition so that everyone's going to look directly in the middle of your painting. And I think it's interesting, we both enjoyed this setup. We both liked the dynamism of that diagonal and the shadow falling off the edge.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that it's so centralized. Even though when I framed up the camera, I made sure to offset the apple to the left. The way I cropped it in the end, because in the end I cropped it because I was the first to paint. I just made a giant X focused right in the middle of the painting.
Yeah.
You can see how dull my green was, and then I went in with a higher chroma, brighter value green now with thicker paint in the light mass. Look how similar in value our blues are on the left-hand side. I really like that glow you're getting with your blue.
What do you mean?
I don't know, just in the video it looks like it's glowing. It has a luminosity to it, like it's being lit. I can really feel the light source in yours, and I don't feel it as much as mine.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of why that might be.
I don't.
Well, I sort of exaggerated what I was seeing in terms of where the light was hitting the cloth. The difference between the value of the cloth, say, at the left-hand corner and at the right-hand corner of what I was seeing in painting was not as dramatic as the way I've painted it. I've painted a bigger change going from left to right in value than I actually saw because I liked it.
And it works. I think it works better than mine, which at the moment looks very flat. I really like the dramatic lighting of yours.
Here I am with the glare again.
Yeah.
Losing my mind.
My apple looks so dull next to yours.
It really does, but your strokes are the softness of your strokes is very pretty.
Oh, thanks. It doesn't look that dull in person. On its own, it doesn't look that dull. I'm really surprised.
Now, we haven't put the two paintings together in real life and looked at them side by side. We've only looked at these pieces of video side by side.
Yeah, and this is the first time we're seeing each other's paintings. So. That was a mistake up top. I made it way too bright. The pit where the stem is, I made way too bright and had to work it back and work it back. And I still think it's too bright in the end.
At this point in mine, I have done the required work. Everything's covered with paint. I have light and middle and dark values. I have the basic form of the apple. So now it's kind of, the work that I'm doing is sort of optional. I could have even left out the stem and not painted if I'd wanted to. It would have looked fine. So now I'm just I'm kind of noodling a little bit and I'm adjusting stuff that I feel like adjusting, but I'm not building up the structure of the painting at this point. That's done.
Notice that for both of us, we work dark to light, and that neither of us have tried to tackle that highlight yet. You've got to reserve the highlights till the very end, or else they just disappear. Or you fight with them, have to work around them. It makes no sense to paint them any earlier than the last few brush strokes of your painting.
And it's the fun part. It's the dessert. You save the dessert till the end.
I guess. I struggled over mine.
Well, see, for me, it's like you're doing this and it looks pretty good, and then when you paint the highlight, it pops. You go, oh yeah, that's an apple. That's a shiny apple.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah. I use so many brushes. When you saw me cleaning the brushes, you remarked at how many brushes I had used.
I did.
See the glare? So, something I forgot to mention. When I was painting the shadow, I was using the techniques you talked about in your Monet video, where it's marks of color sitting next to each other that make the solid form. So they're two distinctly different colors sitting next to each other with individual marks. Like the background is just one flat block of black, but the cast shadow is a series of different colors and marks. That's one of the parts of the painting I really like, is the cast shadow. And again, I like that idea of trying to paint a painting of one value. So in black and white, it would disappear, and it's all just made up of chroma. It'd be hard to do.
Yeah, it would be really hard to do.
Figure out the correct setup to do it, the correct subject. painting at different speeds. You painted faster than I am, and now because I sped up the playback, I'm painting faster than you. But proportionally, they will be the same, so that when I've got to my 2/3 point, you're at your 2/3 point. And I find it interesting that so often throughout this, we've been painting the same things. We'll hit the background at the same time, we'll hit the cloth at the same time. Like right now, you're cleaning up your cloth, and so am I.
Yeah.
Checking your drawing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see my drawing's off. That background line droops off to the left.
Look how bad my hands were shaking.
Yeah, I mean, it's the illusion of the camera. You're holding your hand at an awkward angle, and the camera is dramatically steady, and it's accentuated because it's so close to the lens. There, I'm trying to get rid of the Balrog glowing.
I tried to use that technique once for a painting of a freeway on fire in Los Angeles. Didn't really work.
This is one of my favorite parts of my painting. That little bit of reflected green, that is, again, the same value as the cloth, but a different color. And I think it worked. It's really subtle. And you can barely see it in the video, and you can barely see it in person, but it's there. And you look on the reference image on the setup, and it's there too. It's very subtle, it's very hard to see, but it's there. And I was really happy that I was able to get that.
See, that's something you get from two different sets of eyes, because I did not see that. I didn't paint it because I didn't see it.
It's subtle, you had to really look for it. And because I've been doing all these value exercises for our Patreon, I am just aware of value, maybe more aware of value than you are right now, just because I've done half a dozen of these exercises.
Yeah, it could be. I like how you scratched out where the stem was going to be before you started painting it. I think that would have been a good idea. I should have done that.
It allows for a greater level of
course, I don't know, because my paint was much thicker than yours, so I think it might have turned into a mess. I don't know. You'll see me wrestle with the stem a little bit later on.
It's another thing that we both did. We both left the stem to the very end, and similar to the highlight, if you paint it too early, you're just going to be covering it over and finding it again, and covering it over and finding it again. It's details like that sit on top. You really need to wait till the end. And see, again, we're working on the stem at almost exactly the same time. Though you did your shadow first.
I did the shadow first. I had a heck of a time with that shadow.
I had a difficult time with it too. It's that subtlety. It's that, you know, it fades off. It's a very subtle thing to capture. My apple is very much a study in subtlety.
Yeah. Yeah, I think those value exercises that you've been doing made you more attuned to the reflected light on the lower right of the apple. I don't know if you've necessarily emphasized it or if you just noticed it more, but it's really there on your painting and it kind of isn't on mine.
Well, you've got glare there, but when I squint, the value looks pretty close, but what I didn't get is the color. I lost the blue.
Oh.
So there's a lot of blue on the underside of that apple in the setup, and I don't have it in mine. And I wish I had. It would have been a great opportunity to really play with color. I'm really disappointed that I didn't really capture the blue at the base of the apple. It looks nice in the setup, and I just didn't get it.
Alex was talking about how we're kind of painting the same parts of the painting at the same times. And most people who have a little bit of an education or experience in painting have a similar logic to what gets painted when. If you've never ever painted before, you might paint the apple first and then the background and something else. But I think most painters have a certain logic, except I did a master copy of a Cézanne once, and so I had to look into Cézanne's process a little bit, and Cézanne would just paint patches all over his painting with no apparent logic. He would just jump from little area to little area to little area, and eventually, like a quilt or something, it would kind of get put together. I don't know why he did that. It made the painting very difficult to copy because it was like, what's the structure of this? How do I proceed? What are my steps? It was really hard. So, don't know what was up with that. Interesting technique. Hey, there's the highlight.
Cézanne was about the act of observation, as far as I understand it. I haven't done a lot of research on Cézanne. Kind of the fact that normally when we look at something, we look at it in patches. We look at this spot, and then that spot, and then that spot. And there's no real rhyme or reason to it. And painters take all of those various pieces of vision and assemble them into a cohesive whole, and he broke down. So when he looked at something, he'd paint what he saw, and then he'd look somewhere else and paint where he saw, and that created this patchwork of a painting. And so the result was more of a record of his experience looking at something. There's me scratching out again.
Did we reach the disaster moment? There's a moment when a disaster happens on this painting. I don't think we missed it. I would have noticed. Oh, I think it's coming. Yep. There's the disaster.
What?
There's a hair. There's a brush hair stuck on my painting.
Oh.
And it won't come off.
That's value. Those brush hairs are coveted. People love brush hairs in painting. I mean, look at Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel. They covet those brush hairs in the Sistine Chapel.
I mean, but think about like the size of a brush hair related to the Sistine Chapel ceiling versus the size of a brush hair related to a 7.5-inch painting.
Yeah.
Also, I'm not Michelangelo, to my knowledge. If anyone out there would like to covet my brush hairs, I'm open to inquiries.
Now you're lightening up your cloth bringing it closer to mine.
Yeah.
And emphasizing the light mass, or the cast light, which I did not. And then I was fixing the center X that I have realized was such a problem in post. So now I'm fixing my drawing mistake of that background line. Well, I lost the drawing in the upper left-hand side in trying to, I wanted to defocus the background, make it softer.
And I realized that the difference in value that I was seeing between that little area of light cloth that I'm painting and the side of the apple, that it is a difference in value, and on my painting it wasn't there. They were pretty much the same value, so I am adjusting that.
Yeah, I brought my values closer because I bumped up the value of my shadow mass. It's brighter than I observed it. One of the things I do like about my painting is even though it looks so much duller next to yours, but my shadow mass reminds me of that, do you know the Degas self-portrait where he painted it in multiple steps and he had the Prussian underpainting? I think it's in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I think so.
It's a really gorgeous self-portrait, really tiny. It's about the size of these paintings. But also, is it David or is it Ang who did that male torso holding the staff?
Oh yeah.
With, again, that's Prussian underpainting. I think it's Ang. Really beautiful painting. I love both those paintings, and I've always tried to recapture that sense of transparency and that glow from the burnt sienna underpainting. And I kind of got it a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's about the most successful part of my goal of trying to achieve a transparency of underpainting in an alla prima painting, is the shadow mass of the apple there. You can see that I actually added red to my cast shadow. I really liked the blue that was popping out, the cobalt blue, and so I added a violet, a deep violet. So it kind of has this sort of glimmering jewel effect where the complements are playing off of each other. Works really nice in the actual painting. It's not showing up as well on the video. Okay, so that's it. They are finished. Those are our paintings. So I hope you enjoyed this. I certainly did. I found it fascinating.
Yeah, I was really fascinated to see Alex's approach because it was so distinctly different from mine, and also kind of different from ways that I've seen him paint in the past too. So it was a thrill ride.
Thrill ride. That'll be the title of the video. An apple thrill ride. I'm really happy they came out so differently. Honestly, I was afraid, because we're both concentrating on how to teach and present a unified teaching front, I was really afraid we'd end up using the same technique, and we didn't.
We did not.
Part of that is, I think, up to me just being completely lost when I started.
And I think I did a lot of what I did because I have copied a lot of Impressionists, both lately for the Monet video and for that Impressionist influenced still life, and then also in years past I've done Pissarro copies and Monet and Cezanne, post-impressionist, and I don't know if you ever have, Alex?
No, I started a Monet Haystacks and never finished it.
Yeah, I think the last copy that Alex did, last master copy, was a Vermeer. So we've been marinating in very different approaches to painting.
Though, I mean, mine was, I think, frankly, more influenced by your Monet water lilies than anything.
Really?
Yeah, well, it's that shadow. I keep coming back to that cast shadow.
Oh, right.
It's one of my favorite parts of my painting.
So let's tell each other what we like the most about each other's paintings.
Oh, okay. So, the things I like most about yours is you've got a vibrancy to it. The apple itself is a very nice high chroma. I really like that glow that's happening in the cloth, particularly on the left-hand side, and the fact that you emphasize the light source. It gives it a real sense of drama and presence. I also like that you chose to allow that shadow to just fall off in the background, and I think it works. Doing that could flatten the painting, could make that fall back. It could look like a hole in the painting, and I don't think it does. I think it works.
Thank you. I really like the smoothness of the surface of the apple. I think you've really captured the actual feeling of looking at that apple and how the surface sort of feels to your eyes. That doesn't make any sense. But especially with the way that you just did that highlight and the way the highlight is diffused by the surface of the apple, it's really accurate. I didn't try for that kind of accuracy, and I think I really like the effect that you got because you did. And I also like what you were talking about the dark side of the apple, how that burnt sienna underneath is coming through. And I remember that encre painting that you were talking about that had kind of a similar effect. And I think you used it really effectively. And also your stem is really nice. Mine got kind of bent. And it wouldn't matter that the stem on my apple is bent if we weren't looking at two other images of the same apple.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about painting is unless you're painting someone's portrait or like an architectural rendering or something like that, you can change whatever you want. And we both did, and I like that. I played around, I guess, less with the image and more with the paint.
Yeah, in terms of putting the paint on the canvas, mine is pretty much the same approach on every area, and you varied the way that you were going at it.
Do we have anything else we need to say? Should we say who won? Who won the painting?
What? Well, I got done faster.
That's true. You won the race.
I won the race. In professional artist terms, we would need to sell them, and then we'd find out who won.
That's true. But that's a different sort of winning.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that I was afraid of when we went into this. I mean, we're inviting comparison.
Yeah.
And it's not something I actually like to encourage, because the thing I'm hoping is communicated with this video is not that one is better than the other. Because I think when you look at these two finished images, one is not better than the other. They're simply different. And that is one of the great things about painting, that different painters produce different work. And that you as a painter, if you've come to this channel wanting to learn to paint and you want to be a painter yourself, that you should, as a painter, focus on the things that excite you. And that's what we did with these paintings, is that we each focused on different aspects of painting technique that excited us, that interested us. And as a result, we have two very different paintings. And that's style. I've seen a bunch of YouTube videos talking about how to achieve your style. The way you achieve your style is by focusing on the things you like to do. That's it. You do the things that you enjoy, that you want to see, that you want to do, and your style will just be there. I hope that what you take away from this is not that there are good or bad ways to paint. What I like to say is that the only right way to paint is your way to paint. And so that's what we tried to show here. I hope you found it valuable, and I hope that if you are a painter and you are interested in painting, that you take that to heart, that you don't worry about what other people are doing. Only worry about what you're doing and how your painting turns out. Does it achieve what you wanted? No. Work on it again. Yes. Terrific. Do you like it? Terrific. If you like it, someone else is going to like it too. Boy, that was a lot of...
That's more talking than Alex usually does in a week.
Yeah.
I used to have a real problem with feeling competitive about my art, comparing myself to other people and feeling like I needed to be better in some nebulous way. And really it was because I hadn't experimented enough to figure out what I wanted. So because I couldn't envision what the painting should be, I would just compare it to others. And it resulted in a lot of negative feelings, a lot of frustration, and held me back for a while. And what I needed to do was kind of work on myself as a painter. I needed to understand what I wanted. And I needed to paint in a lot of different ways so that I could understand what I wanted. And then once I understood what I wanted and what appealed to me and what I enjoyed doing, then the competitiveness kind of went away. And I was happier as a painter and a better painter.
Yeah. What's important is focusing on yourself, not comparing yourself to others. And we tried to illustrate that by comparing two paintings.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll see if it works. Let us know in the comments what you thought.
Yeah.
So we just like to say thank you. And in particular, thank you to our patrons.
Yeah.
We really do appreciate you. And I mentioned several times in this video a series of exercises I'm working on. We plan to be posting those soon to Patreon as part of a beginning painting course that will start you with the very basics and lead up to more and more complicated paintings. So if you're interested in that, check out our Patreon. We'll be posting those very soon. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for watching. There's no point in making a video without someone watching it, so thank you for watching. You've made this worthwhile.
Yes, thank you for watching.
And I hope you come back. Oh, and if you liked it, tell us in the comments, and we might do it again.
Yeah.
And if you did like it, please give us a thumbs up, and consider subscribing, because it really helps us out.
Yeah.
All right, have a good day.
Bye.